Hi, my name is Bonnie Kahili, and I started teaching back in 1977 in Lee County, Georgia. It was a split session of kindergarten. Well, I retired 2 years ago from Woodstock Elementary School as the academic coach, but I was fortunate enough to come back for a couple of more years to work part-time there. I retired in 2015, and they hired me to come back and work part-time for my volunteer tutoring program I had started there. I come from a long line of service workers. My mother dabbled in nursing and my father was a doctor, and I grew up in a little town not so unlike Mayberry, where I would follow him around and just enjoyed seeing what he did with all of his patients. I knew that I didn't like the sight of blood, so I decided to go into education where I felt as though I could affect a change with children, and my niece was also an inspiration to me at that time. Well, she lived with us when she was growing up, and it was always so much fun to help her learn her colors and how to button her robe and things like that, so I just decided to make a career out of that. The first year that I started teaching in Leesburg was it was awe-inspiring. I had a wonderful mentor in my principal, that was her first year as a principal as well. It was a small system that had one elementary, one middle, and one high school, and there was only one kindergarten class up to that point. So when they hired me, they gave me a budget that I could buy whatever I needed to outfit my classroom, and started teaching with a parapro and had a morning and an afternoon session of kindergartners. My most favorite memory of my career as teaching was the opportunity to introduce my second graders to my second grade teacher purely by chance. I grew up in Southwest Georgia, absolutely adored Mrs. Heath, and when I moved to Cherokee County, it was at a time that a lot of people were moving into the county. So every year I would take my students on a field trip to the state capitol to learn more about their new home. And after about 10 years of doing this, I'm kind of bored with the same information, and happened to look all the way up at the third floor and could see people from my hometown, and asked a parent, would you please watch my little group? I need to go upstairs. And it was my second grade teacher who had brought her class to the state capitol all the way from Southwest Georgia. So it was really cool to be able to introduce my second graders to my second grade teacher. There's no doubt that I miss the interaction with my volunteers. I miss the interaction with my students in particular and my coworkers. So having worked in the capacity of meeting the needs of these children by organizing volunteers to work with them, we did develop a bond and a camaraderie, and the children absolutely loved coming to Camp Learn-A-Lotta, so it was a good experience all the way around. Well, since I have retired, I wonder sometimes how I accomplished everything while I was working. I've been really busy. I've always been active with the City of Woodstock and serve on the Main Street Woodstock Board. So there's always something going on in downtown Woodstock that I love, making that connection between Woodstock Elementary and also the city. I have joined a couple of organizations, or I've had more time to be part of those organizations to really work with the people in those, and just catching up with friends, being able to go with my husband and do things at odd hours, or what seems to be odd hours now. 7 o'clock, waking up in the morning is just heaven. I have been fortunate as a teacher to work with inductive teachers in their first year, mentoring them, and also many student teachers. And what advice I always gave to them were these things. First of all, advance your degree as quickly as you possibly can. Also, diversify your degree as much as you possibly can. You need to make sure that you have some kind of tax-sheltered annuity outside of what you're drawing with your benefits. Never take your money out of teacher retirement system. And remember your classified personnel, because they are truly the people who run the school. So you want to make friends with the office staff. You want to make friends with the custodians. You want to make friends with the bus drivers. You want to make friends with the cafeteria people as well, because those are the people who are the heart and the core of school. I just want to say how much admiration I have for today's teachers. It is a very difficult time to be a public school teacher, and I admire their grit and determination to ignore all of the noise that happens to be out there right now concerning schools, and really concentrating on working with students and giving them the best education that they can have.
Hello, my name is Karen Hawley. I began teaching in Cherokee County in 1979 at Woodstock Elementary. I taught 3rd grade for 10 years. In 1989, I became the assistant principal at Woodstock Elementary. In 1999, I had the privilege of being named principal at Freehome Elementary. In 2002, I had the great privilege of opening Liberty Elementary. In 2007, I moved over and became the principal of Freedom Middle School, where I retired in the year 2013. I retired from Freedom Middle School in 2013 as principal. I wanted to become a teacher because of my 2nd grade teacher, Ms. Shera. I thought she was the most beautiful lady in the world. I loved to watch her walk in the classroom and hang her coat up and get her materials out, and the way she talked to us, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. But the defining moment for me was when I got into 3rd grade and I had a teacher, Ms. Powell, and she was not as nice as Ms. Shera. I wanted, though, to have another Ms. Shera year, and I wasn't going to have that. So I was fortunate to be able to move on to college and become a teacher and not be a Ms. Powell, but be a Ms. Shera. What I remember from my first year as a teacher, I remember looking up in the rearview mirror of my car, driving the first day with students and thinking, they're really going to let me be a teacher. I'm really getting to be a teacher. I remember the steel blue dress I had on that day. I remember everything about it. But then I remember those kids. I remember those wonderful kids that are turning 47 years old now. And I see them out in the world doing wonderful things, and I remember their sweet little faces. And it's just so incredible that time has gone by that fast. But I just loved being a teacher that first year. It was hard. I didn't know a lot of things. I was frightened at times because I was afraid of some of the teachers, actually, myself, because I was 21 years old, turning 22. And these people looked like they were a lot older than me when really they weren't, but they intimidated me. But I finally found my inner teacher voice and became stronger, and then I listened to those teachers and learned from them. My favorite memory from my teaching career is when I was asked to become the principal and open Liberty Elementary School. There's a lot of wonderful memories. I have great kids that I still keep in contact with from 1979 until now. But being told that I would get to start a brand new school, something that had never been before, that I think is my greatest memory. And I have so many wonderful memories from that school and those kids, and it was like getting to start your own brand new house. You know, it's nobody else's dirt or clutter is in that building, it's yours. And you get to make it and start it and create something. And I'm so proud to look back at that school now, 15 years later, and see such a wonderful, thriving group of teachers and administrators and kids and parents doing such wonderful things. But I have a lot of memories. I could talk about every one of the schools where I worked, the kids, the people. I could go on for days about that, but I think getting to open a school for a principal has to be the highlight of my career. The thing that I miss most about being in a public school, obviously, is the kids. I miss the kids, I miss the teachers and the camaraderie, but I miss those special days. I miss things like Veterans Day. I'm sure in schools today there's Veterans Day programs going on. I miss little simple things like Johnny Appleseed Day in our kindergarten classes. I miss that brown bear, dressing up in all the colors. I miss the middle school kids just coming and talking to me and telling me their problems and letting me listen to them, and just absolutely watching them become young people right in front of my eyes. I miss all of that. I don't miss getting up at 4:30 a.m., but I do miss the people. And that's why I try to travel a lot now and see my former students and teachers doing different things that they're involved in. When I first retired, I wanted to take a deep breath, but there were other people that had other ideas. I became involved with the Cherokee Retired Educators Association. It was the first thing that I really got involved in, and I like that group of folks because our main purpose is to support our current teachers and to support everything they're doing in their classrooms, support what's happening at the state capitol with our retirement funds and the future teacher retirement funds, and just fellowship and network with each other. But then I also did things like volunteering in schools, which is a big part about the retired educators, and helped some fellow principals do things. But then a couple of years ago, I was ready to work again. And so I have been teaching at Reinhardt University since 2015. Enjoy every day that I'm there working with the young people that are going to be educators someday. I also have done some work, some special volunteer with the central office here at Cherokee County. Love to be asked to volunteer and do things. But also I try to spend some time with my family, some quality time that I didn't get always when my son was young, or when I was working so much. I try to go visit my parents as much as possible, and I'm glad I did that. My father passed away last year, and I was glad to be able to be there when he was sick and in his last days. I try to get home now to see my mom much as possible, and my brother and my sister and their families, and because family is really what it's all about. The advice I have for a first-year teacher is enjoy every second of it. Hang on for the ride, the good days, the bad days, and there will be bad days, but don't take anything for granted, because suddenly you'll be like me and 34 years will go by just like that. Enjoy every little comment those kids say, high school teachers, every comment those big kids say. Take it all in and know that you're part of something very special. You're changing the lives of children and young adults every day. Don't take it for granted. Public education is so important, and that is why I am still out in the volunteer world, helping. Some people seem to think that they know better and other ways of educating kids is the way to go, but I see too many wonderful things happening in public education today. The teachers here in Cherokee County and some of the other districts that I visit with my work at Reinhardt, wonderful things are happening. Don't let that slip away. Fight for your public education, because it is the best.
Hi, I'm Peggy Corbett, and I started teaching in 1986 when I was 32 years old, so I was a late bloomer. I started teaching in New Orleans, Louisiana at a Catholic school. I taught middle school for a year, and then my husband and I moved to Canton, and I've been in Canton ever since. So really, I count my teaching career as being a Cherokee County School District teaching career. I taught English 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, except for that unfortunate year of 6th and 7th, and English. So I taught genre classes, I taught world literature, I taught American literature, and I was the AP Lit teacher beginning my fourth year I taught AP Lit, and the rest of my classroom experience was primarily AP and Honors World Lit. My last gig was at Creekview High School, where I taught for 6 years. I went to Creekview from a 10-year position at the central office, and so my first year at Creekview, I was ninth and 10th grade on-level classes. Coach Dr. Bob Eddy was the principal who was responsible for getting me that position. And then after 2 years, I started back in AP Lit, which was where I was most comfortable, and very involved there with AP Lit and senior projects. So I was very, very determined at 20 not to be a teacher. So when I went to college, I was adamantly opposed to majoring in education. Even though my father and mother were both teachers and encouraged me to be a teacher, I said, no, everybody in our family is a teacher. I'm not going to be a teacher. So fast forward 10 years, and I had 2 small children, a husband who was on the road a lot, and I needed to go back to work, or I felt like I needed to go back to work when my daughter started kindergarten. So when she was 3, I went back to school at the University of New Orleans and got certified to teach English. And so I guess I was a reluctant teacher, but I just was so lucky that I loved it, and I think I was pretty good at it. My first year of teaching, as I mentioned earlier, was at a private school, and the year would have been 1980, 86, 87. And what I remember most about that year was how little support I had as a new teacher. They pretty much gave me 2 English books and some chalk and a classroom and said, teach. I cried a lot that first year because I didn't know if I'd made the right decision. I was always a day late and $1 short, trying to keep up with deadlines and have, that was back in the day when we had to handwrite report cards and handwrite all of our records. Everything was so primitive compared to the way it was when I retired. But I got through the year, and I had sweet children, and I had a good year. Another thing I remember about that year is it was so cold. New Orleans is such a cold place in January and February because it rains a lot. And we had this giant overhead heater that sounded like a Boeing 707 when you turned it on. So my husband put a big rubber mat in the front of the room so I could stand on a rubber mat instead of on the terrazzo floor. And I had gloves that I cut the fingers out of. And so I would write on the chalkboard wearing a coat and gloves like Charles Dickens' character. And then I would tell the children if they were really good and would let me get my lesson taught, I would turn the heater on. So then we would crank up the heater and warm up for a little while. Yeah, it was different. My favorite memory as a teacher is that, it's hard to put a finger on one event, but my favorite time as a teacher was 1990 when Sequoia High School opened. I had been an itinerant teacher, so I taught mornings at Cherokee High School, afternoons at Etowah High School, so I was back and forth. And when you are itinerant, you don't ever really get a sense of belonging to a school community. So when Doe Kirkland, who's like, a goddess, when she hired me to go to Sequoia, that was my first time really being immersed in a school community. And I mean that in the broadest sense of the word. A young, excited, happy faculty with a brand new school. In 1990, Sequoia would have been just the 3rd high school. And also in a physical community. Hickory Flat was still so rural and agricultural, and everybody, their parents had gone to Hickory Flat, their grandparents had gone to Hickory Flat. There was just such a multi-generational thread that went through Sequoia. And I live in the Hickory Flat community. So I was living and working in my community. My children went to Hickory Flat and Dean Rusk, and then they came on and went to Sequoia. It just was such a happy time. We had so much fun. We loved everything about our jobs. We loved our kids. We loved our football team. it was very similar. It felt very similar to my high school experience in South Georgia, where we only had one school, and so everybody had school spirit. It was a fun time, and we were young. What I miss about teaching is I miss the kids. I miss the energy of a high school. It just could light up a community. It could turn all the lights on. It's just so vibrant. And I miss the relationships that I have with kids. I've been so blessed to teach great kids and grateful kids. I ran into one of my former students yesterday at the animal shelter, and we had a nice long visit and talked about books that we're reading. So I've kept up with them over the years. My class of 1993, that was the seniors of 1993, I actually taught those kids for 3 years. I had them 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. It was just a fluke. I moved up as they were moving up. So when you teach kids for 3 years, and I never really taught all my kids for at least 2 years, but that group 3 years. So I miss that. I miss my colleagues. I miss having those collegial relationships where you share your work experience, you talk about your kids together, we socialize together. It's just such a bond that you have with the people that you work with. So I stay busy as a retiree by all the typical kinds of retiree things. I do volunteer work, I read, I garden. My husband and I like to play golf, and we have a boat. Recreation is something that we're able to enjoy now. I think probably the thing that I enjoy the most is not being exhausted all the time. Teaching, no matter how gratifying it is a physically exhausting job. And we get that great summer vacation, but it literally takes us all summer to kind of recover from long days of teaching, long nights of grading papers. It takes a physical toll. I think it took me all of last year to finally be rested through and through. I've done some consulting work, working with teachers, which taps back into my experience when I was a teacher on special assignment at the central office, when writing was my focus. So I do training on instructional strategies, but mostly like I told you earlier, I enjoy not having to set an alarm clock every day. Looking back and thinking about where things are going today, and I think they're going in a remarkable direction. But I think I was so blessed to be a teacher when I was a teacher. Technology. We went from chalkboards to whiteboards to computers to online grades to not having to write out our progress reports. There's so many things that were made available to us in Cherokee County that made our jobs easier. I remember when Dr. P came to Cherokee County, it might have been 2001. Everybody was like, oh my God, there's going to be so many changes, and we were nervous about the changes, but oh my goodness, the places that we went in that decade after he came was just mind-blowing. So it's been fun. It was a fun ride. I enjoyed it. If I were to sit down with a new teacher, and sometimes I do, I sense from them already exhaustion and fatigue and the feeling of being overwhelmed. And so I would tell new teachers, it's so important to remove yourself from negative situations. Back in the day, we had teachers' lounges. We don't have teachers' lounges anymore. But I used to tell young teachers, stay out of the teachers' lounge, because that's where people tend to go to vent and complain. You just don't need that kind of negativity. I remember a teacher saying to me when I first started, my first week, she said, oh my God, you're old enough to know better. And I thought, what a terrible thing to say to a new teacher. To new teachers today, I would say, you're going to be blessed beyond measure. You just can't imagine the blessings this career will bestow on you if you can stay focused on the positive. And to me, that means staying focused on kids. If you every day go to work trying to remember that you have the power to make a difference in a child's life, just by a word, not even by a lesson, but just by a word. To remember that not every child comes to school with the same advantages that your children go to school with, that's very hard for young teachers. They tend to judge the world from their unique perspective. You know, this has been my experience, so it must be everybody's experience. And of course, that's not true. We have kids that come to school every day who are food challenged. They don't have parents who are encouraging them. They may have seen terrible things happening at home. If you could just remember that every day, that every word has such power to a child, that would be my advice to a new teacher.